Mr. President, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as of the abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights. And therefore, I hope it shall not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. Could you please raise your hand if you recognize what I was just quoting? The speech has just been talked about here. When he ended that speech, his remarks were, give me liberty or give me death. That speech was delivered March 23rd. Here we go. March 23rd, 1775, not very far from here, in Richmond, at the St. John's Church in Richmond, which the House of Burgesses had flown to because they were kicked out of Middle Plantation, Williamsburg. They were dissolved by the royal governor. So they met in St. John's Church in Richmond. And what Patrick Henry was doing in those opening remarks was actually giving himself leave to disagree with the very worthy gentleman that had just preceded him. And there were some very worthy gentlemen in that assembly. It was, again, the meeting in the House of Burgesses. The people listening were James Monroe and James Madison and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. They were all in the room. So he was giving himself leave to say, I'm going to disagree, and if I didn't express this disagreement forcefully and righteously, I consider myself to be guilty of treason because this is my duty. I kind of find, I'm telling you all that, folks, because I kind of find myself in a similar situation. I'm going to say some things here in the next couple of minutes that you might agree with and you might not. But I beg you leave to tell you that I respect your opinions no matter what they are, and I consider this room to be a room full of very, very worthy gentlemen and gentlewomen. The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document. Please say that with me. The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document. All right, let's do it like we mean it now. The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document. Thank you. The words are not going to leap off the page and defend themselves. In order to achieve its noble purpose, the Constitution requires the people to be its champion. And ladies and gentlemen in this room are the people's champions of champions. Right? So it's a privilege to talk to you people. And I'd like to ask you once again to repeat after me. There is a Creator God. Our rights come from Him. The purpose of civil government is to secure and defend God-given rights. Essentially what you just recited, there is a God, our rights come from Him, and the purpose of civil government is to protect God-given rights. That's quintessentially the American view of law and government. It's the philosophy of American law. It's contained pretty precisely and concisely in the Declaration of Independence. See, the purpose of government is not, by the way, this is a great question to ask anybody who's running for office. Just ask them, what's the purpose of government? It's kind of a simple, straightforward question. It's kind of a stumper because it's so direct. But you'll get a lot of crazy answers to the question. But what did Jefferson say the purpose of civil government was? To protect God-given rights. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So the purpose of government is not to make sure your seatbelt is buckled. It's not to make sure you're eating your veggies. It's not to redistribute your wealth. It's not to take it from him, because clearly he's got it, and give it to him because clearly he needs it, right? That's not the purpose of civil government. And by the way, the purpose of civil government is not to protect your health. It's to protect your liberty so you can protect your health. There is no right way. I once had a pastor say to me, Michael, there is no right way to do a wrong thing. There's no right way to do a wrong thing. So when government officials do something that they do not have the authority to do, it never turns out well. It's always a failure. Matter of fact, it really can't be anything but a failure. Now, I'm going to make some remarks that have to do with my state. There are some sheriffs from my state. I come from Annapolis, Maryland, and I'm privileged that there's some sheriffs from the great state of Maryland here, the free state of Maryland. I'm going to say some things about our governor and about the situation in my state and the constitution of my state, and they're going to be very similar to yours. So just bear with me. These remarks apply to you, even if some of the language of your Constitution is slightly different. So when government officials do something they don't have the authority to do, it can't turn out right. And Governor Hogan's unauthorized interference in the economy and in health care and his misuse of the police powers are no exception. You see, fidelity to the Constitution is one of two ways that we judge whether the actions of civil government are lawful or are pretended legislation. And by the way, pretended legislation is a term that comes from the Declaration of Independence. You know, in the Declaration, they listed 27 grievances against the king and against the Parliament. About 3/4 of the document is really a list of grievances. And in one of the grievances, they said that he has combined with others, they were referring to Parliament, in their acts of pretended legislation. He didn't call them laws. In other words, they called them pretended legislation because they knew they were not law. And I think it's a very important distinction. As a matter of fact, when I was watching, and I beg leave to correct my good friend Richard Mack, when he was reading from his own case, he said that quoting the judge, he said that Sheriff Mack is therefore forced to choose between following his oath and obeying, Richard Mack said, the law. But on the screen it said something different. What did it say? It said the act. Because the act is not a law. That's essentially the situation. As a matter of fact, the Martin Luther King quote that you saw a little while ago, where it said, we shouldn't obey unjust laws. Well, there is no such thing as an unjust law, because something unjust is not a law, properly understood. So it's really a question of determining and knowing and being able to discern what the law is and what the law isn't. And our founders called these things that Parliament was doing, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, the Townsend Acts, what they call the Intolerable Acts. Our founders looked at those things and said, they are acts of pretended legislation. And by the way, you know what they called it if you violated an act of pretended legislation? They called that a pretended offense. The Declaration of Independence calls that a pretended offense. That language, I think, is something we should adopt, not only because it's historic, but pretty accurate too, isn't it? We shouldn't think of things like gun laws, which violate the Second Amendment. They're not laws. They're acts of pretended legislation. They're not the law. So you don't really have a choice between following your oath and the law. You follow your oath, that is the law. Right? So sorry for the little aside there. But fidelity to the Constitution is one of the ways we determine whether something is pretended legislation. If it violates the Constitution, it's not law. The other standard used to judge whether enactments of civil government are lawful is God's word. It's the Ten Commandments. The purpose and the methods of government must not violate the moral law. This is the eternal standard. So there's a temporal standard, the Constitution. There's an eternal standard, which is God's word. Now, in 1776, the American argument for liberty from English tyranny rested squarely on these two standards. The Declaration of Independence, as I said, is a list of 27 grievances against the misuse of the police power by the king. And after presenting the evidence supporting these grievances, they reasoned that George III was unfit to be the ruler of a free people. That's the language they used. They said he is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. And their logical and legal conclusion from that point was that King George III, by his persistent and continued violations of their colonial charters and his arbitrary and capricious actions, had unkinged himself. He had unkinged himself. You see, his repeated violations of the compact, the contract that had previously bound him to the people, necessarily resulted in the dissolution of that compact. And so, by this declaration to the world, along with examples of his conduct to back it up, they were justified to declare that they were no longer bound to him and that he was no longer their king. Then, of course, as you know, they called upon the Supreme Judge of the universe to bless their efforts as they pledged their lives and their fortunes and their sacred honor in support of that cause. So now hit the fast forward button and come to today. What is our challenge today? I'm sure you're already anticipating it. Applying this historical record to our present situation, the parallels are pretty clear. Governor Hogan and other governors has openly and notoriously violated the Constitution of Maryland and his oath to protect it in at least the following ways. Now, I'm going to list 6 ways quickly that he's violated the Constitution. This is going to be true in your state in one way or another. I could probably list 26, but I'm just going to list 6 quickly. Article 1 of the Maryland Constitution of the Declaration of Rights says this, that all government of right originates from the people, is founded in compact only, and instituted solely for the good of the whole. So all government of right originates in the people. There's no inherent authority that comes from the ether somewhere that an executive has. It has to be in the compact with the people, that is to say, the Constitution. So by means of lockdowns, house arrest, and closing of churches and businesses, Mr. Hogan has broken that contract with the people of Maryland. And I ask you to think about this. The office of governor is a creature of the Constitution. It comes from the Constitution. If he suspends the Constitution, what does he also suspend? His own right, his own authority, his own office. Article 4, this is the second one I'm quoting here, that the people of this state have the exclusive right of regulating the eternal government and police thereof. In other words, they're not his police. They're our police. Mr. Hogan has commandeered and misused police power to enforce his unlawful edicts and orders. They are not his police, as I say. The police power derives from we the people. Article 8 says that the legislative, executive, and judicial powers of government ought to be forever separate and distinct from each other, and no person exercising the functions of one of said departments shall assume or discharge the duties of another. You know this as separation of powers, right? Your Constitution in your state has a similar provision. Well, Mr. Hogan has violated the separation of powers by pretending to make laws by means of edicts and orders and proclamations and whatever else you might call them. He's violating the Constitution because he's violating the separation of powers. Governors don't make law. Courts don't make law. Article 24 says that no man ought to be taken or imprisoned or seized of his freehold, liberties, or privileges, or outlawed or exiled, or in any manner destroyed or deprived of his life, liberty, or property, but by the judgment of his peers, that is to say, a jury, or by the law of the land. But by pronouncing that some businesses are non-essential, Mr. Hogan has deprived citizens of their property and their liberty without due process of law. Article 36 says that it is the duty of every man to worship God in such manner as he thinks most acceptable to him, him being a capital H, a manner most acceptable to him, okay? All persons are equally entitled to protection in their religious liberty. Wherefore, no person ought by any law to be molested in his person or estate, or account of his religious persuasion or profession, or for his religious practice. Mr. Hogan has unlawfully closed churches and has misused the police power to molest citizens desiring to express their religious liberty. Lastly, but this is the 6th one, but as I said, I could probably do 16 or maybe more. Article 44 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights says this, that the provisions of the Constitution of the United States and of this state apply as well in time of war as in time of peace, and any departure therefrom or violation thereof under the plea of necessity or any other plea is subversive of good government and tends to anarchy and despotism. Ladies and gentlemen, this could not be more on point. No plea of necessity or any other plea validates the suspension or the violation, the deprivation of the Constitution. There is no COVID exception to the Bill of Rights. You hear these expert You hear these experts on TV, the constitutional experts, and from the beginning of this crisis, this occurred. They come on and they're asked a question about the deprivation of rights, and they use this language having to do with balance. They said there's a balance. You have to balance the rights of the people versus the compelling state interest. They use words like least restrictive means and compelling state interest. That is all hogwash. There's no word balance is not in the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed is pretty sweeping language, by the way. It's the most sweeping language in the Constitution, I think. Okay. So the conclusion is that by breaking the contract with the people from whom all governmental authority originates, Mr. Hogan has rendered himself unfit to be the representative of the people of Maryland. Just like George III unkinged himself, Mr. Hogan and other governors have ungoverned themselves. Thank you, the five of you that clapped for that. I appreciate it. By misusing the police power, which originates in the people, and by suspending the Constitution which binds him to us and us to him, he has suspended his own office. So let me be clear about what I'm trying to say here. I'm not here to advocate for the removal of Larry Hogan from the office of governor. I'm here so I hope you collectively recognize and mutually comprehend and declare that he has removed himself. He has removed himself. A number of us has taken to calling him the former governor because he has removed himself. These are his actions. They are his consequences. Now, if I had the blessing of being able to address a gathering of law enforcement professionals, if God would grant that blessing to me, if I could somehow be able to speak openly and directly to these fellow Americans, I think I should be careful not to falsely appeal to their pride, but rather earnestly appeal to their intellectual honesty and their demonstrated decency, and say something like this. Respectfully, sir or madam, when you took your oath of office as a sheriff, police, or other law enforcement official, you swore obedience and fidelity to the United States Constitution and to the Constitution of this state. You did not swear allegiance to a county executive, or a governor, or a mayor, or a health department official. And right now, I'm encouraging you to remember that solemn promise and to live up to its terms, because right now, as your country and your state are in peril, it is especially crucial that you rededicate yourself to this noble calling and duty. And here's the point. Your fidelity to your oath and to the rule of law requires you to abstain from enforcing any edict or order from any governor or any executive which lacks constitutional authority. Moreover, your duty requires, as we saw in the film with Rosa Parks, your duty requires that you resist such edicts and orders and that you use the police power that comes to you from we the people so as to shelter and protect the citizenry from all acts of lawlessness, even and especially when they originate from civil authorities. I think I might say something like that if I had the opportunity. And to everyone else, I would add that if it were not for the courageous commitment and righteous action of our countrymen over 2 centuries ago, you and I would not be sitting in this auditorium at Liberty University. There probably wouldn't be such a place called Liberty University. So our commitment, I would ask you to consider that our commitment, your commitment, will help to ensure that our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, can stand on a lawn outside or sit in an auditorium like this as free men and women in the free state of Maryland or the Commonwealth of Virginia or any state in these United States of America. I thank you. If I have a moment left or 2 moments left, I would like to do a quick demonstration of the idea of interposition. Do I have a few minutes? Yeah. I have 1 minute? Oh, thumbs up, thumbs up. I thought I had. Okay. Let me ask you, quickly, I wanted some volunteers. Cindy Jones, would you come up here and stand right in front of the podium and face the people? And then can I ask you table of gentlemen right there to stand up and join me here? Cindy, stand right in front here. Now, you are the citizen. You represent the citizenry. Let's call you Miss America, okay? You are Miss America. I want you to choose for yourself right now 3 members of your local legislature, local branches. I want you to choose a mayor and a judge and a legislator. So we need, come on, here we go, Jake's gonna help us. All right, so you stand right here and face straight out toward the camera, Cindy. Okay, now I want you 3 gentlemen to come around her as a shield, 1 in the front and 1 on either side. Okay? All right, now, yeah, hand those to the gentleman. Okay. Now, standing in front of Cindy and beside her are the 3 branches of local government. Okay? They have shields and swords designed to protect her from all enemies, foreign and domestic, right? Okay, I need 3 more gentlemen, or ladies and gentlemen, please, quickly. Please, gentlemen there, would you stand up and join us? Yeah, come on. Because you're going to be the state government. Cindy, choose. These are your state government officials. There you go. Okay, so you have a governor in the center. Ronnie, you're the governor. Turn around and face that way because you're defending. You 2 gentlemen, one over here. Okay, one over there, one on this side. Okay, I'm trying to kind of get this thing going here. Kind of like a wedge thing going. Okay. There. Now this is your state government. In the middle, Ronnie. In the middle. Now give me 3 more people to be the federal government. Okay, I want 1 to be the president. Give me a president of the United States. Here, come on, gentlemen. Yeah. Okay. Now when I do this with kids, I've taken to using lightsabers. Jake, can you give these guys sabers? They're in the box right there. These guys lightsabers. Okay, so look at the tremendous phalanx of protectors she has. Now, all of them represent a branch of government and a level of government. And as was said earlier here, and as I think James Madison said, all of these governments are jealous of each other's authority. They're jealous of their own authority, right? And they don't want intrusions by others. But she's got a Congress and a president and a federal judgeship and the state level and the local level, right? Now, I want all you gentlemen to just take a step outward away from Cindy, just a little bit. Just move away from Cindy. That's it. Okay, good. Now, right in front of Cindy, we have all these levels of government that are protecting her. But right in front of Cindy, we have a very important office, which is the office of sheriff. Sheriff Cummings, would you come up here and be the... All right. I want you to get right behind this gentleman with the blue shirt and in front of Cindy. Give him a little room so he can do that. There we go. All right. Thank you very much for your all right. Now, you see, now look, they all got lightsabers. They're all protecting her. Now, over there in the legislature of the federal government, that gentleman was, yes, him. All right, now, because he has become corrupt, he is no longer facing that way defending her. He's going to turn around and face her and say, he represents the EPA, and he's going to say, you're going to abide by these regulations of the EPA, right? Now, there's 3 state level people there, and they're going to protect her, right? Right? Yeah. Except probably not. What they're going to do is turn around and face her, so the 6 of you turn around and face. Now, see, he says, we're going to enforce their laws, even though they're unconstitutional, right? And we're going to confiscate your property if you don't. So all of the, I'm trying to summarize this, but okay. Now, the local government, and I've served on the local government. I was this guy right here. And when I served in local government, what happens is local government gets bribed by the federal government to adopt programs and to pass pretended legislation that we would never do otherwise, but we get money when we do it, right? So we're bribed with that. So these 3 local officials now all turn on her too. So everybody turn around, everybody except the sheriff. Face her. No, now, see, you see what's happening here? Now that whole phalanx of protection she had has become what? Has become a tyrannical, horrible mess, right? And who's left? Who's left? And he's standing against all of this, isn't he? Now, this is also why it's very important. If you think about it, a couple of things are important. One is that he's local, because Cindy might be his cousin or his grandmom or his niece or somebody, right? So it's important that this local protection, that we know who they are, that they're one of us, that they come from us, right? This is why the local body is so important. And none of these people, these other jokers out here with their that have turned against her, right? None of them has the authority that he has. The reason I wanted to do this is to give you kind of a visual situation of what's going on. Now, one more thing, it's a shame Sheriff Darleaf had to go, because he does this demonstration in his speeches. And what he does is, at this point, show that the sheriff goes out into the audience and does what? What does he gather up? Right. Because surrounding Cindy now is the sheriff and his whatever, the militia, the posse, whatever. So, why does this happen, by the way? Why do they all turn around and face her? Just, that's the way the world is. It's the fallen nature of man. This is our founders recognizing the fallen nature of man, which is a biblical principle, right? And so that's why they divided all this up. And they divided the power so that they would all be jealous of each other's power, of their own power, and resist. But when they dare I use the word, when they collude against the citizenry, this is the dangerous situation that has to be avoided. So in addition to making sure you have a sheriff, the sheriff needs to, first of all, understand these things. I'm almost finished here, guys. By the way, y'all, thank you very much. You can retire. Thank you very much. My last point is this. In order for the sheriff to be successful in this, first of all, he has to know the truth. He has to know the Constitution, and he has to know Scripture, because that's the basis for the law. Remember we talked about the two standards. There's the eternal standard and the temporal standard. He has to know them. He has to be able to distinguish between what's pretended legislation and what's law. And he has to not enforce pretended legislation and enforce law. That's been said here in a number of other ways here today already. If he's going to do that, he not only has to know those things, he's got to know he's right. He's got to know his job. He has to discern these things, and then he has to be backed up. He needs support. He needs a citizenry who understand these things. And that would lead me to about a 90-second commercial for Institute on the Constitution, which Jake is going to do for me right now. Jake is going to finish up. This is our Director of Institute on the Constitution, Jake McCauley. And ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention.
So how do I back that up, right? Thanks, Michael. Bring on the JV after the varsity talks. I don't know. It was back in 2004. I went through a program called Teen Challenge. Many of you have heard of it. I was a pretty rotten kid, did a lot of dumb things. Couldn't stand any of you in this building, by the way. You discriminated against me because I like to break the law, and you wanted to stop me from doing that. Anyhow, after I went through that program and became a Christian and started traveling the country with a Christian band and talking to kids about my testimony, and I got in a lot of trouble around 2008. I don't know if y'all know what happened then. A lot of separation of church and state. But in 2004, there was a gentleman who was running for, let's say, president, and his campaign slogan was God, Family, Republic. That gentleman was Mr. Michael Anthony Peroutka. I had never voted up until this point, and I had had my life changed. I was a Christian. I was a good guy, but I didn't think Jesus had anything to do with our form of government, our constitutional republic. How many of you know Christians that think that way? They would insult you for even bringing it up. They would insult you for wanting a Bible study to talk about the biblical foundations of America. And that's just a sad thing. We've come a long ways in America. Well, Michael, in a resurgence to bring that knowledge back to America, met me, an 18-year-old kid who loved Jesus but was completely misled, had no idea of the fingerprint and the handprint that God had placed on this country. So when he was on the campaign slogan, I said, "Dude, I want to meet you." And Michael came to Minnesota to our ministry center and talked to us for probably about 2 hours. Just a sincere gentleman. And he gave me this course. How many of you have taken our Institute on the Constitution course of study? Awesome. So we have a handful of graduates. Everett Boone is one of our chapter leaders here in Virginia, and I know he's personally taught over 100 plus. He's had me come to a lot of churches to speak, because I'm now an ordained minister. But we have a course of study. I want to encourage you to take it. Sheriff Darleaf actually requires all of his deputies to take our course before they go on the beat. And I've had a chance to go with him, meet some of those gentlemen that take the course. I think it's important, it's crucial. If we swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, we ought to understand what the heck it says, shouldn't we? And so that's our mission. We also have a DVD back at the table. If you like that interposition analogy, Michael does this very well. It's a 45-minute segment. This would be great to watch and to view, to do viewing parties. In concert with Sheriff Richard Mack, we have a sheriff's course of instruction, along with Sheriff Jeff Christopher, who was mentioned before, and a number of other law enforcement officials, just to go over how do we apply the Constitution as sheriffs. Now, I know all of you are smart, you love freedom, and I am so grateful to be here. Honestly, I truly, truly am. America needs you. You are the brightest light here. You are the hope for individuals. I live in Johnston County, North Carolina, and our sheriff has said, "I don't care what that knucklehead says up there in the big office." He didn't call him a knucklehead, that's what I called him, the governor. "But I will not be arresting anybody in my county for trespassing or for not wearing masks. All you businesses, you determine what you feel is best." Amen. Let's give him a hand. And I believe all of you would do the same. We would love to help you out. If you become a member at Institute on the Constitution, we have about 5 courses of study that you get free. You become a part of our database. So I want to thank you for that time. We have a table right back there. We'd love to visit with you all. God bless you, and thank you so much.
Very quickly, something I forgot. I was reading that letter, that message to law enforcement officials as part of my presentation. I developed a letter to law enforcement officials. It's on our website at Institute on the Constitution. It's also on our back table there. It's the little green pamphlet. It says, "Dear fellow American." It's what I designed, actually. We designed for common citizens to give to law enforcement officials that they meet either in friendly or unfriendly circumstances. And the reason I want to highlight this and ask you to take a copy off our table is I think this could be greatly improved, Sheriff Mack, if this was something that came from you to you rather than from an outsider like me. If you took something like this and wrote a letter to law enforcement officials from a law enforcement official or from the group in some fashion, I believe it would go a long way and toward its viability and its credibility. So I just want to, please take one of these. Thank you. Sheriff Mack, thank you. Thanks, Sheriff Vaughn. Thank Liberty University.